Revenge office stories. The CEO was smiling. The intern, Leo, was nervously shuffling through the presentation slides, my asterisk slides. From my seat in the back of the cavernous, glass-walled boardroom, I could see his hands shaking. They really thought a 37-year-old woman, the one they'd so casually sidelined, would just stand by and watch her career's biggest project get handed to a kid half her age. They were all waiting for the final slide to load, the one that would kick off the live demo and seal their victory. But what they didn't know, what none of them could possibly guess, was that I'd left a little digital surprise in the code, a masterstroke of passive aggression I'd spent every spare moment of the last 2 weeks planning. The CEO, the board, my condescending boss Mark, and his Wonder Boy intern were all about to see the real project status report. Before I show you how a few lines of code exposed years of insidious office politics and brought their entire dog and pony show to a grinding, humiliating halt, let me know in the comments. What's the most satisfying I told you so moment you've ever had at work? It all started 3 months ago, but the seeds were planted long before that. My name is Sarah, and until recently I was the senior systems architect at a mid-sized tech firm we'll just call Stark Innovations. I wasn't just an employee, I was part of the foundation. I had just celebrated my 10-year anniversary, a milestone that got me a cheap plaque and a lukewarm email from HR. For a decade, I poured my life into this place. I worked late, I mentored junior devs who are now leads at other companies, and I was the one they called at 3 a.m. when a critical server went down. I devoted the best years of my professional life to building this company's technical backbone. My masterpiece was a project I codenamed Chimera. It wasn't just another program. It was a revolutionary client management platform. Think of it as a central nervous system for our clients' businesses. Using a predictive AI model I personally designed to streamline logistics and automate resource allocation. I dreamed it up on a whiteboard in my office, pitched it to a skeptical board, and won them over with a raw proof of concept I'd coded in my own time. I was its architect, its lead developer, and its biggest cheerleader. Chimera was my baby. I knew my worth, and I knew the industry. It has a reputation for ageism, especially against women, and I'd seen it firsthand. It's no secret, you see it in surveys all the time. A huge number of people in tech feel there's a real problem with age discrimination in the sector. I knew that being a 37-year-old woman in a leadership role made me a bit of an anomaly, surrounded by fresh-faced graduates. Older workers, particularly women, often get stereotyped as less adaptable, which is not only untrue but deeply damaging. Because of that, I had to be twice as good just to be seen as equal. I made sure my skills were always razor sharp. My performance reviews were stellar, year after year. I wasn't just competent, I was indispensable, or so I thought. The first crack in my world was Mark. He was hired from outside as the new head of product, a classic corporate archetype. He was handsome in that generic, forgettable way, with a smile that never reached his eyes and a vocabulary made up entirely of buzzwords he'd learned from a TED Talk. He talked about synergy and paradigm shifts, but I never once heard him say anything that made technical sense. All style, zero substance. During our first meeting about Chimera, he barely looked at the architectural diagrams I'd spent months on. Instead, he leaned back and said, "This is great, Sarah. Really solid foundational work. But we need to inject some dynamism, some fresh perspectives." A cold, knot tightened in my stomach. I knew that kind of coded language. It was corporate speak for, "You're old and your ideas are old." A week later, Leo arrived. He was the fresh perspective. A 22-year-old intern, straight out of a prestigious university with a computer science degree and a mountain of confidence. He was smart, I'll give him that, but it was textbook intelligence. He knew the what of every new technology, but had no clue about the why or the how. He hadn't spent a decade wrestling with legacy code or debugging a critical issue on a holiday. Mark immediately took Leo under his wing and assigned him to shadow me on Project Chimera. At first, it seemed harmless. I tried to mentor him, to explain the nuances of the system, but he wasn't listening. He was just watching and reporting back to Mark. Soon, meetings started happening without me. Decisions were made in conversations I wasn't a part of. I'd come in to find a component I'd carefully built had been rewritten by Leo overnight, usually in a less efficient but more fashionable way. When I tried to explain the performance issues, Mark would just wave his hand. Don't be a gatekeeper, Sarah. Leo's bringing that startup energy we need. Startup energy, I quickly learned, was code for breaking things and having no idea how to fix them. I started spending my nights quietly cleaning up Leo's messes and patching the security holes he'd casually introduced. The day they stole it was a Tuesday. I was called into a mandatory Project Chimera strategy meeting. I walked in and saw Mark at the head of the table with Leo next to him, looking like a proud puppy. The whole dev team was there. The air was thick with tension. Mark cleared his throat and started his speech. Team, he began, his voice oozing fake sincerity. As we move into the next phase, we need to optimize our workflow. We're doing a little reorganization to inject agility. My blood ran cold. I knew what was coming. To that end, he continued, turning his smile on Leo, I'm thrilled to announce that Leo will be stepping up as project lead for Chimera. His innovative approach is exactly what this project needs. The room was dead silent. My team, the people I'd mentored for years, stared at their laptops, anywhere but at me. I could feel their shame like a physical weight. And me? Mark finally turned to me, his face a mask of fake sympathy. Sarah, your deep institutional knowledge is incredibly valuable, which is why we're reassigning you to a new initiative, legacy systems maintenance. We need a steady hand there. It was a professional execution. Legacy systems maintenance was a corporate graveyard, a dead-end job designed to bore you into quitting. It was a public, humiliating demotion, a classic tactic to push an older employee aside for younger, cheaper talent under the guise of fresh ideas. I looked at Mark. I looked at Leo, who at least had the decency to look uncomfortable, and I did the only thing I could. I smiled, a calm, tight, professional smile. I understand, I said, my voice perfectly even. I'm happy to help wherever I'm needed. I stood up, gathered my things, and walked out with my head held high. On the outside, I was the picture of compliance. But on the inside, a cold, hard fury was starting to form. They hadn't just stolen my project. They had underestimated me, and that was a mistake they would regret. Before I tell you how I used their own arrogance and a few lines of code to bring their world crashing down, could you tell me in the comments if you've ever had someone take credit for your work? It's a terrible feeling, and I want to hear your stories. My new office was in the basement. I'm not exaggerating. It was a windowless box next to the humming server room. The message was clear. You are obsolete hardware. The work was soul-crushing, patching a billing system written in a language that was ancient when I was in college. It was meant to break my spirit. The first week was the hardest. The pitying looks, the awkward conversations, the silence when I walked past the conference room where Mark and Leo were now leading stand-ups at my whiteboards. They were clearly waiting for me to break down, to have an outburst, to quit in a huff. But I didn't. I did the work they gave me. I documented everything. I even optimized the ancient billing system, increasing its speed by 30%. I was a model employee, quietly rotting away. What they didn't know was what I did with the other 7 hours of my day. They'd given me the two things a plotter needs most: time and privacy. And in an act of staggering incompetence, they made one critical error. My title was changed in the HR system, and my Slack access was gone. But the overworked admin who processed my reassignment never revoked my root administrative credentials for the development servers and the company's version control system. In IT security, there's a cardinal rule called the principle of least privilege. It's simple. You only get access to the absolute minimum you need to do your job. Not revoking my credentials wasn't just sloppy, it was a massive security hole, leaving them wide open to an insider threat. Their arrogance made them careless. They had handed me the keys to the kingdom. From my basement exile, I became a digital ghost. I had a backdoor view into everything. I watched the Project Chimera Slack channel, a silent observer to their slow-motion train wreck. I saw the panicked messages, the confused questions, the growing frustration. Mark and Leo were butchering my project. Obsessed with flashy visuals for the board presentation, they were making catastrophic changes. They replaced my stable backend with a trendy but unstable new framework Leo wanted on his resume. They rewrote my elegant algorithms with clunky code that caused constant timeouts. Their goal wasn't a functioning product. It was a dazzling demo for the CEO and the board. The big presentation was in 2 weeks, and it was all they talked about. I started planning. Every night, I'd log in and pull the commit logs from the Git repository. A commit log is a permanent history of every single change made to the code, who made it, when, and why. Their log was a diary of incompetence. I saw Leo's commits. Feet. New animated button, breaks login. An hour later, fix, reverted login breakage. Then another, whip, trying to implement Mark's parallax scroll idea, build failing. I saw Mark's comments in the project tickets. Priority, ignore backend stability for now. We need the UI to pop for the demo. To prioritize security audit, focus on visual polish. They were building a hollow shell, a beautiful facade with nothing behind it. The demo they planned was pure smoke and mirrors. And that's when the idea formed in my mind. I wouldn't just break their demo. That was too crude. I would use their demo to show the CEO the unvarnished, undeniable truth. I would make their own failure the star of the show. My plan wasn't simple destruction. Just deleting the code? That's too emotional, too obvious. This had to be cold, clinical, and undeniable. It had 3 stages. Stage 1, the migration. Using my admin privileges, I would copy the entire Project Chimera repository, every line of code, and the complete commit history, to a secure, private server that only I controlled. I'd do it late on a Thursday night before the presentation weekend. Then, I would replace the official repository with a single, harmless text file. The project would simply be gone. Stage 2, the CI/CD trap. This was the clever part. CI/CD stands for Continuous Integration / Continuous Deployment. It's the automated pipeline that builds and deploys code to a server, in this case, their live demo environment. They trusted it completely. I would reconfigure that pipeline. Instead of pulling from the now empty official repository, the pipeline would be rerouted to pull a custom web page I had prepared. My payload. Stage 3, the payload and the payload? Not a 404 error. Not a hacked by message. That's for amateurs. My payload would be a thing of beauty. When Leo launched the demo, it would load a perfectly rendered, read-only web page using the company's official fonts and colors. At the top, a large, bold header would read, Project Chimera, a postmortem by Mark, last name, and Leo, last name. Below that, the page would contain a single thing, a live auto-scrolling, color-coded feed of the real Git commit log from the past 3 months. Red for broken builds, yellow for security warnings, green for my own secret late-night fixes pushed under a generic system maintenance alias. Every panicked comment, every directive from Mark to prioritize looks over function would be displayed for the entire leadership to see. I wasn't a saboteur. I was a curator of the truth. The day of the presentation arrived. The office air was electric. I put on my best forgotten basement dweller outfit, a simple black sweater and slacks. I was a ghost at the feast. Mark and Leo didn't even see me when I slipped into a chair at the back of the boardroom. At the head of the long, polished table sat Mr. Davies, the CEO, an old-school engineer who'd co-founded the company. He wasn't impressed by buzzwords. He was impressed by things that worked. The rest of the C-suite was arranged on either side of him. Mark was in his element, gliding around, radiating a smug confidence that made my skin crawl. Leo trailed behind him, pale and nervous, a lamb being led to what he thought would be a glorious, career-making slaughter. I sat calmly, my heart hammering against my ribs. I focused on my breathing, feeling a strange sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie I had written and directed. The lights dimmed. The projector hummed. The stage was set. Mark stepped up to the podium, launching into a performance of corporate doublespeak about disruptive innovation and synergistic vision. He praised Leo, calling him a once-in-a-generation talent who had revolutionized the project's trajectory. I almost laughed. Trajectory was one word for it. But enough talk, Mark said, beaming. I'm going to hand it over to Leo to give you a live demonstration. Leo, show them the future. Leo, trembling, clicked the link on the presentation slide. The screen flickered. For a single, tantalizing second, the flashy login page they'd spent weeks on appeared. Mark's smile widened, and then it was gone. It was replaced seamlessly by my payload. The company logo appeared, followed by the crisp, bold title that hung in the silent room like a death sentence. Project Chimera, a postmortem by Mark, last name, and Leo, last name. A gasp went through the room. Mark's smile was vacuumed off his face, replaced by a slack-jawed mask of pure horror. Leo turned a shade of white I'd never seen before. He frantically clicked his mouse, but the page was read-only. No escape. Then the commit log began to scroll. 2 days ago, commit 98B7C6, Leo, feet. Final polish on demo UI. 2 days ago, commit 5D4E3F2, Leo, fix. Quick hack to hide 500 server error on dashboard. 3 days ago, commit 2C1B98, Mark. Comment, priority, this must look good for Davies. Back end can be fixed later. 4 days ago, commit F7E65C, Leo, revert. New data model, corrupting database. 4 days ago, commit 1A2B3C for Leo, feet, new data model. 5 days ago, commit 8G7H6J5, system admin. Chore, patched critical security vulnerability in authentication module. The scroll continued, a relentless autopsy of their failure. The CEO, Mr. Davies, leaned forward, his engineer's mind instantly grasping what he was seeing. He saw the incompetence, the shortcuts, the disregard for security. He saw my phantom system admin account, patching their mistakes in the dead of night. The room was utterly silent. Mark looked like he'd been turned to stone. His career was being meticulously dissected in real time for the most powerful people in the company. Mr. Davies slowly sat back. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. Mark, he said, his voice dangerously low. What is this? Mark stammered. It must be a hack. Mr. Davies ignored him. His eyes scanned the room and finally landed on me, the ghost in the back. He remembered my original pitch, my passion. Sarah, he said, his voice cutting through the tension. My office. Now. He turned back to the front. The rest of you meeting adjourned. Mark. Leo. Wait for HR. A cold, absolute dismissal. I stood up, walked past them, plugged my own laptop into the projector, and with a few keystrokes, pulled up the actual working version of Project Chimera from my private repository. I gave the demo I was meant to give all along. Okay, I have to be crystal clear here. What I did was career suicide in 99.9% of cases. It was corporate sabotage. It likely violated the Computer Fraud and Abuse Act, which can come with serious legal trouble, like fines or even prison time. Let's be real. People who pull stunts like this don't get pats on the back. They get sued, fired, and blacklisted. It was a monumental risk. But this was that 1-in-a-million scenario. I hadn't just exposed liars. I had the evidence to prove that I saved the company from launching a disastrous product. Mark and Leo were fired before I even finished my real demo. I was offered my project back, a promotion to Director of Systems Architecture, a significant raise, and a seat on the company's technical review board. I accepted on one condition: a full audit of the product department's management to make sure a fiasco like this never happened again. Mr. Davies agreed without hesitation. They thought they could sideline me, bury me in the basement, and write me off. They saw a 37-year-old woman and assumed she was past her prime and would go quietly. They fundamentally misunderstood who they were dealing with. I didn't just get revenge. I exposed a toxic culture of style over substance and forced a change. I proved that experience and integrity aren't legacy features to be phased out. They're the foundation of success. They thought they could just write me off. They learned the hard way. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold, check out this playlist of my other jaw-dropping revenge stories. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more, and I'll see you in the next one.